if you're going to go out and try this, the organic fan finder content, no calls to action, that's what has been performing. Not even having like in the past, I've talked about Instagram stories and stuff we've done there where I found it really effective to have like a swipe up to listen on Spotify, call to action on the actual creative. And we don't have that on Reels. We haven't tried that out yet, but we don't currently have it on there. Just on the basis that Reels is really a place where you're probably like lounging around just scrolling and don't really want to be told what to do.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Indiepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to Creative Juice. I am your co-host, Jack McCarthy. It's great to be here with you guys today. With me is my co-host, Mr. Ed Isola. Ed, what's up, dude?
I am excited about today's episode. I'm doing well, and Jack and I had to start recording before we got too far into it pre-podcast so we could get all the thoughts down here today.
Yeah, man, I'm so pumped too. Like you were saying, we pre-roll, we were kind of just chatting about what we were going to talk about today and some of the results that we've been seeing. And we were getting like so hyped up and excited to talk about it that we were like, all right, like enough, bullshitting. Let's just get right into it. So I don't want to waste any more time. Let's dive in. I mean, today we're going to be talking about some tests that we've been running at the agency with Facebook's new Instagram Reels placement in Ads Manager. So if you guys aren't aware, back earlier in the summer, Facebook rolled out the ability to run ads on Instagram Reels as a placement. And we were pretty pumped about it, to say the least, and to start doing some testing. And over the past couple of weeks, we got to do so. So what is this all about, Ed? Give us the breakdown. Let's just start talking about why we wanted to do this. Absolutely.
Well, I think what's interesting about this is that Instagram Reels, in my mind, is very closely linked to TikTok. It's the same type of content. Instagram Reels is really like Instagram's solution to TikTok or counterpoint.
I was gonna say a lot of people would argue that like this was Facebook's answer to TikTok, and some people would probably go like, no, it's not. It's something, but like we're not going to argue that point here. Yeah. I'm certainly not.
If it was or wasn't, it's very similar. And I think that that's something that indies and myself get really interested in, is like, oh, how do you go viral on TikTok, or how do you grow using TikTok? And that's a little bit harder because their ad platform's still coming together. But Instagram Reels is kind of a way to channel that in a more controllable way. So, that was really like the main motivation behind it for myself, and I think you as well, was like we had seen across a couple different artists we work with, we had seen some success and some virality using TikTok and using fan finders and that kind of stuff. And it was like, okay, how could we channel that into Instagram Reels, considering it's a brand new placement, and really kind of do some exploration around what the best way to use this cool new feature is. And I think one thing that was interesting when we jumped into it was like, well, what's the objective going to be, right? Because you're going into this unknown thing. We want to have some kind of measurables. So our goal going into it was to very clearly say like, okay, we're going to be trying to grow our Instagram following, and we're going to be trying to grow our Spotify followers. And that, as we get into this, you'll hear those are the benchmarks that we talk about in terms of how effective certain types of campaigns have been.
Totally. Yeah. I think that was definitely a big point in my mind as well, was like you were saying, we had seen across a couple different accounts with some clients that we work with and with your band as well, virality happen on TikTok and the impact that can have, which is great, from an organic perspective. And I think what kind of clued me into have this inclination about what Reels could do once we had the ability to advertise there was we started seeing the same sort of content that was working on TikTok from a viral perspective translate really well to popping off on Instagram Reels. So kind of keeping that really, really tight thread. As soon as Reels ads opened up, I was like, oh man, like now we can, like you said, kind of control this and put controlled tests together that we can run traffic on and not have to count on popping off virally or organically. So I was really excited to see what we could do there and really just kind of get into this new placement and see what was possible with it. Cause I think it's probably going to change, like by the time this episode is released, there might be some changes to the way this placement works. But right now it's definitely got some limitations, but it's also got some really good stuff. I think before we get into like talking about the campaign structure that we used for testing and the creatives and the audiences and all that good stuff, something I want to touch on here is like IG Reels, up until this point lived as largely an organic sort of space where people were just consuming content. If you hop into Reels, you're not seeing a massive amount of calls to action. You're certainly not seeing like tons of like swipe up creatives being posted day to day by people. It's very much content that fans of whatever it might be, whether it's an artist or a band or a brand or an influencer, they're just engaging and consuming. And I think that was something that we took into account when it came to starting to pick out creatives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you guys spend any time on TikTok or Instagram Reels, like Jack said, you don't see a bunch of like swipe up to hear this or swipe, it's just like easy to digest content that kind of is short, punchy, to the point, and really organic. So I think that's a great spot to start, is what kind of creative were we using, like you were just saying. And it's like, I believe everything like that I've used, and I think the stuff for the other test campaigns we were using was all very organic, fan finder-esque type stuff. I know for myself, the campaigns that I was running on it, literally it was just repurposed fan finder clips that were about 15 to 30 seconds. So, I mean, on that front, I think that's a really important distinction, is that if you're going to go out and try this, the organic fan finder content, no calls to action, that's what has been performing. Not even having like in the past, I've talked about Instagram stories and stuff we've done there, where I found it really effective to have like a swipe up to listen on Spotify call to action on the actual creative. And we don't have that on Reels. We haven't tried that out yet, but we don't currently have it on there. Just on the basis that Reels is really a place where you're probably like lounging around just scrolling and don't really want to be told what to do. That's kind of how I use it, at least.
Yeah, I don't find that it's a very call to action friendly placement for content in general, let alone ads. I think what the user experience there right now is, and this could totally change. Like advertisers are going to get in there now, and it's probably going to change. But right now, what the user experience on Reels is just, like we said, kind of consuming, viewing, engaging, but not being told like go somewhere else or go do this thing, which I think is, or at least not in a heavy graphical kind of way. Like, you're not going to run like big swipe up graphics on your Reels videos, or bars on top and bottom with text. It's just not. It just doesn't the user experience doesn't favor that right now. That's not how people are using it. So that's why I was so excited to test this, was because it was a platform, or a placement rather, that from a user perspective is so unadulterated, but to advertising, it's not really it hasn't really been tainted or touched, which is cool. And I think real quick, an interesting like parallel between what we're seeing work on Instagram Reels and what we always talk about with what works best for fan finders is that they're very similar. They're very indirect. There's no call to actions really. It's just like, here's a cool piece of content with that wow factor to stop you scrolling, make you like it. And what we're finding is that on Reels, people will go take the action, regardless if there's a call to action or not. And we'll get into the different types of campaigns we've tested and what's worked best. But it seems to be a place where if somebody likes what they see on Reels, they'll take the initiative and dig deeper into it, which is cool. And that's really similar to what we've seen with like TikTok organic content, is when people find something that they like, they then go and explore your profile, and they go and check out, your music on Spotify. They look for the song. That's a lot of what we've seen. And I think a lot of artists that have done any amount of stuff on TikTok would probably agree. That's a lot of what we've seen there. So yeah, I mean, just to give you guys a broad kind of overview of how Reels ads work is it's right now, Instagram Reels are a placement within the Facebook Ads Manager. So in order to run traffic on videos in Reels, you have to build an ad campaign inside the Ads Manager. And at the ad set level, you can actually select Reels as a placement. And it's something where you're running on Reels either by itself, or you're choosing automatic placements, and Facebook can then choose to put your ad creative on Reels in addition to anywhere else that it might be running it, like Newsfeed, Instagram Newsfeed, Stories, so on and so forth. But for the test that we were running, we isolated Reels, which I would, at this point, I would probably recommend doing if you're planning on testing this. That way you can, really make sure that the spend is getting dedicated to go there. But that's kind of the rundown of how Reels ads kind of start out. And then you actually build the ad at the ad level inside Ads Manager. So you upload your video, and you can, create your post copy. And that's kind of what lives as the little caption under the reel. And that's kind of the starting point of building out these sorts of campaigns. It's really simple. You choose a campaign objective. There's a few that are available: video views, conversions, traffic, reach, and there's a few more as well. But those are the kind of main ones that we were thinking about. And where we started testing was in two different kinds of campaign objectives, but we'll get into that in a second. I want to touch just real quickly on, we kind of already started here, but like talking about the creatives that we chose and why they were so important with regards to, one, just like the organic nature of the Reels placement, what kind of content people are used to engaging with on there. Ed, you want to talk about what you chose for the test that we ran specific to you, since it was so tied into what you saw success with on TikTok?
Yeah, absolutely. So the creative, this was exciting to me on a personal level because I had a video that went viral last November on TikTok. So we actually just took that exact same creative, exported it, and put it onto Reels. Now, what that creative is, it is a 15-second clip of a fan finder performance we did for a song, and very, very basic. We essentially, it's just like has a couple of lines that I think are pretty good, kind of stop you scrolling, and then just I'm sitting on the ground, the camera just kind of pans to the side. I'm sitting on the ground, swaying back and forth, and that's the video. So it's nothing crazy. It's got a good beat behind it, which I think is something people are starting to see a lot of on TikTok, that good beats and lyrics that really speak to the user are great to kind of implement. But that's it. We didn't put any additional effort into the Reel or the TikTok. It was like we filmed the video, then we went into Canva, we uploaded it, so it was the correct dimensions, the 1080 by 1920, which is important if you're going to make your Instagram Reels. You have to match the Instagram story in Reels dimensions. So you can use Canva for that. But yeah, just really organic kind of creative, pulled from a fan finder. And on top of that, the caption for the video is very similar to what a traditional fan finder you would see. I think ours was like, it's never enough to be almost in love, which is a headline you would probably run if this was a standalone fan finder campaign.
For sure, yeah. That's why I was so excited to test this too, because we had a use case for that video on TikTok, and it was like, oh, well, this is the obvious candidate to choose. For the other campaign, for the other band that we were testing it for, we picked a music video that they had run as a fan finder before. It was a performance-based music video, and it had a couple cuts in it, but the Reels variant that we created actually didn't. It opened with a wall kick, which was really interesting. The guitarist jumped up on the wall and kicked off. So very much like a pattern interrupt right then and there, and very high energy, heavy hitting. Something that would stop your scroll if you were hanging around in the Reels section of Instagram and you were into this kind of music that you were being targeted with it. So similar kind of fit. It was something we had run as a fan finder on Facebook and Instagram in the news feeds before and had performed really, really well. It was for a song that the band had a lot of traction on and gotten a lot of love from their fans. So we picked that one as a kind of obvious choice as well. But again, like Ed was saying, all of this kind of comes down to like finding stuff that's, feels native to the placement. I think the video that you guys used for Magdalene, it feels very much like it was, it's one camera, kind of shaking around, a little bit of movement, but very, very, very simple, not super crazy, high production value. There's not really like flipping to a story or anything like that. It's just you guys doing your thing. And same with the other band that we did the test campaign for.
And I think something you just mentioned that's great is like the principle of a pattern interrupt is exactly the same when it comes to Instagram Reels. Like we haven't tested and we haven't run any campaigns with just like a static image saying, hey, swipe up to listen, or like, hey, my single's out, swipe up to listen on Reels, right? Like you guys can test that, but I don't think that's going to necessarily go that well. And that's why we've started with this organic content with the pattern interrupt. And I think one thing to add is like Jack was just talking about the jump off the wall, right? Like that's going to stop you scrolling. Something that I found interesting that we did was we actually had text on the screen, but it was our lyrics. So very similar to TikTok, where it's like, it has this line so that when you're scrolling, the first thing the user reads is this, and it kind of stops them, and then they listen to the song after. I think that's a little bit different and unique to Reels as opposed to a fan finder where you wouldn't have that text on the screen to start off probably. Just based off of the way that the Reels are cropped, like you're going to be tighter in, and it allows for the user to really more closely read text when it's on the screen. So that is an experiment. If you guys have a lyric that you're like, oh, this would really catch somebody's attention, and like, put that on there, put that on the video clip if it's the same scene, because that's what we're running and it's working really well.
Yeah, that's a good point too. That was definitely an interesting kind of variant between the two video creatives that we were testing with. I think that's a good point to bring up as well. Definitely something worth exploring. What's interesting is both videos saw a lot of engagement in the form of, reactions and comments and stuff like that, which is really cool. But before we get into the results that we saw, just to talk about like the campaign structure that we tested for this, kind of just to give you guys like some clues into how we decided to structure our test, was we built two kinds of campaigns. Initially, we started with video views campaigns because we were really just looking to have, no calls to action, just working to get engagement and seeing how that engagement spilled over into followers and engagement on Spotify. And those were kind of like our two sort of metrics that we were paying attention to as far as like a KPI for this test goes. And then the other kind of campaign objective that we tested was traffic. And we tested that towards the tail end of the 502's test. And we got some really interesting results from that really surprised me. From a targeting perspective, there were a couple things that we did just to test out, some different targeting. For one, we used a lot of lookalike audiences. In both campaigns for both bands, we were using 75% video views lookalike audiences. So previous video views that we had that they had gathered on different videos on their Facebook pages and on IG. We used 75% viewers of that in a stacked sort of ad set. We used a big artist targeting, targeting ad set as well, just stacking a number of artists that were similar to the bands into an ad set. We used that. What else did we use, Ed? We used page engagement, Facebook page engagement, which was often a solid choice for testing this sort of thing. Facebook page engagement lookalike. And then a little bit later down the line, we tested Instagram engagement lookalike in a small window of time. So we actually went with Instagram engagement lookalike over the past 30 days. So it was an Instagram engagement audience over 30 days and a lookalike created off of that. The intention behind that was to capture, the most recent engagement, which was coming from, the targeting the ads that we were running up into that point, which was a really interesting sort of addition to the campaign towards the tail end in the traffic variant for 502 specifically. So that's kind of just a general overview of the structures that we were testing. For video views, like I said, we were going for engagement. For traffic, when we tested that for 502s, we wanted to see if we could cause an uptick in Spotify engagement, and also just to see how it would affect follower growth and engagement on IG as well. So we split that. One ad set was pointing to Spotify. One ad set had an ad with a link pointing to Spotify, and the other had an ad set with a link pointing to their Instagram profile.
Yeah. And I think what's cool about this is like, it sounds like Jack just said a lot, but really, and you did. And I would listen to it and write it down and like use that as a template. But if you're already running your marketing online and you already are, figuring out and you're comfortable in ads manager and you're already kind of working on down the funnel type of stuff, like everything that Jack just listed was already pretty much created. In this instance, even the video creative. So the actual setup for this campaign was very, very easy. It was like, make the video view campaign, put in the different audiences, plug in the creative, and you're good to go. So this wasn't some crazy thing where like we had to go out and get new creative and go like make all these new audiences. And it was very much like, oh, just take the pieces we currently have and let's put them in this new placement. So it might be a really easy test for you guys to set up if you are very comfortable in your marketing already. You probably already have assets and audiences that you can use. But I think like Jack said, what was really cool was we started off with the video view campaigns as the main objective, pretty much just off the basis that like, oh, okay, video views are what we typically run for top of funnel awareness. And, if you're ready, Jack, shall we jump into the results we were seeing?
Oh, my breath has been held the whole time. Let's do it.
So yeah. I'll jump in with what I saw for myself, and then Jack can follow up with the campaign he saw for the second band. But we started with the video view campaign, and like I said, we ran it for 2 weeks. We ran it for 16 days. And kind of overall results, we spent $266. We ended up pointing 683 Instagram followers at 38 cents per follower, which was really great. And then on Spotify, we didn't see much engagement or movement really. We were seeing followers for about $1.75, and we added 152 followers. So and we saw a bunch of likes, and every time I would log into my Instagram, there'd be likes and that kind of stuff. Not so much comments, but there was engagement on the video in terms of people liking it. But really my takeaway personally from the video view campaign was that it worked really well to drive traffic to our Instagram and grow our followers there. And it was less effective at increasing our Spotify following.
I think something worth mentioning here is that in the video views campaign at the ad level, we didn't use a link. So there was no link sending people anywhere. So any of the engagement that came in the form of followers to IG or, additional engagement was was those new listeners. It was on their own volition. They chose to click over, which, on one hand was really interesting for us to see. Because we did see a really high follower count come in from, a relatively low amount of spend, 38 cents per follower, which was great, over to Instagram, and around $1.75 a follower over to Spotify. But I thought that was really interesting that we were seeing that, and it did kind of leave us to wonder. And this is why we started testing traffic as a secondary objective down the line, was wondering like, what could we do if there was a slight call to action and we had a link in there? Something else interesting about this was in that video views campaign for you guys, we saw CPMs in this placement are super, super low. And CPM, if you're wondering and you don't know that, what that acronym means, it's your cost per 1,000 impressions. So it's the cost to show your ad to someone to users 1,000 times. So your ad will be viewed 1,000 times. That's what your CPM is. We were seeing for your video views campaign for 502s, Ed, we were seeing $1.66 for CPMs, which is super cheap, crazy. Just I think because the inventory is really available for this, it's not oversaturated like so many other placements are and so many other objectives are. For the other band that we were testing out for, we were seeing 70-cent CPMs, which is just absurd, like absolute craziness. And
I think that has something to do with like the fact that you just said Instagram Reels is so new in terms of advertising on it. So that probably will go up, I would guess, over time. But this is a good time to be doing Instagram Reel ads.
Totally, yeah. And I think that musicians are specifically very in a unique spot right now to use this for audience growth because it's not super saturated. I think because big brands and advertisers that are pouring tons of money into the platform, they may not be seeing from a conversions perspective as far as getting like sales and leads for like let's just say like e-commerce, something like that. They may not be seeing the successes, the wins on that front using this placement, so they're not using it. So those the CPMs are not going up. And again, this is just a hunch. I don't have any data on that for sure, but that's a hunch that I have right now. Speaking of that other campaign, for the other band that we were testing with, we were seeing from those video views, we were seeing 0.3 cents per through play, which is super, super cheap. Obviously, it was a very short video, around I believe it was around 15 seconds. So that's pretty much what we were seeing to get someone to watch the whole thing. Through plays are your 15-second views. But what we saw on Instagram for them as far as growth goes is they saw a 656 follower increase. Now they're getting followers all the time, so it's not a perfect trackable sort of measurement because they are getting followers organically as well. But just knowing what we were spending, that was around a 26-cent per follower cost, which is great. Pretty interesting stuff there. And that was, so both of those results from a video views perspective kind of caused me and Ed to look at each other and say like, all right, like let's do a little bit more with this and just try this traffic test out. So let's dig into that. What are your thoughts, Ed? I mean, we've been running this traffic test for about 4 days now and coming to the tail end of it. I think that's why I was so excited about this episode, because we were talking about so much of this as it was still happening and kind of rounding the bend here.
Yeah, I mean, we're like right in the thick of it, right? Like we're just getting into it, and we've run these other campaigns for 2 weeks, and now we're 3 days into the traffic campaign. And like Jack was saying, I consider the video view Instagram Reel campaign a huge success just on the back of the fact that, I don't think that I'd ever seen 38-cent followers for myself, and 26-cent followers for the other use case is fantastic. So it's something that shows a lot of promise. And the one thing I was not satisfied with was like, okay, well, I want to grow our Instagram, but how much do I really care about growing our Instagram at this point? And what I was more
we didn't want it to be like vanity metrics.
Right. I was like, we were running it. It's like, okay, it's cool, but like, what is that doing for us? And we both kind of were like, oh, this is awesome, it's working. Quickly followed by, well, it'd be cool if we could grow our Instagram and grow Spotify, and like, still a little bit of vanity metrics, but it's like, if you're going to be running and growing your ecosystem, it's cool to kind of get a 2-for-1 thing going on. Right. So that's where the inspiration for the follow-up campaign was, which was the traffic campaign, which did include links to the different Spotify and Instagram. We had 2 separate ad sets set up. First, we set up the traffic campaign, and then we had the 2 separate ad sets set up, and we had one going to Spotify that was targeting just similar artists in the green light countries, narrowed down by people that use Spotify. And then we also had an Instagram lookalike going to our Instagram profile. So those were 2 ad sets within the same campaign. And then the creative was the same piece of creative. So that campaign was set up with the main goal of saying, okay, can we improve our cost per follower on Spotify while also keeping our cost per Instagram follower roughly the same? And from past tests, we had seen like, okay, if you run Instagram to Spotify ads, you see a trickle over into your Instagram in terms of followers. So we were kind of, I guess, hypothesizing that if we combine these two campaigns and run one traffic campaign to Spotify and one to our Instagram followers, we might be able to see both. And like Jack said, we're 3 days into this, and it's going really, really well so far. So over the first 3 days, let's see here. So we spent $47 total. We're spending $5 a day to Spotify, $5 a day to our Instagram profile. And all in all, we're seeing 57 cents per follower to Spotify and 20 cents per follower to Instagram, which our metrics in the first campaign were $1.75 to Spotify and 38 cents per follower on Instagram. So, I mean, that's brought the Spotify follower down from $1.75 to 57 cents, and it's brought the Instagram follower down from 38 cents to 20 cents. And it's awesome. I mean, the click-through rates are looking good. The link click-through rate is 2%. The click-through rate is 5% for all. And the same thing, the CPMs are a little bit higher, but $1.85, so still pretty cheap. And I'm excited to keep this going because it seems like, all right, if we're running these two in tandem, we're getting way better results on both platforms at the same time. So it might be, it might be something where having the link directly on that video in the Reels campaign allows for a user to more easily access where you want them to go. There's still no mention on the creative. This is important. There's no mention of like, hey, follow us on Instagram or swipe up to listen on Spotify. None of that's there. It's still just the video with the simple caption. But there's now a link which does prompt the user, it's like, hey, here's a link if you want to swipe up or learn more. So still really organic in terms of creative, but it does put that link right in front of somebody. And over the first few days here, we're seeing significantly improved results, which is super, super exciting.
Yeah, I honestly was like very, very surprised at how well the traffic campaign was performing from a click-through rate perspective. To be honest, like I think when you and I were first talking about it, I was like, no, like I think the click-through rate is going to suck because like the user experience right now and user behavior on Reels is not about clicking through to stuff. So I was shocked when we were seeing, 2% click-through rates for link clicks and 5% all, which is, they can click in a number of places on the ad, not just on the link that you're putting in front of them. But yeah, I was pretty stunned. I was pretty stunned by that. We're seeing 9-cent clicks on both of those ad sets to Instagram and to Spotify, which is it's pretty fascinating. I was pleasantly surprised to be proven wrong about the user behavior when it came to clicking through. Really interesting.
I think one thing too that's interesting talking about like the user behavior is that, like you said, the click-through rate all is not that accurate because they can click on anything, not necessarily the link. But comparing it to the video view campaigns from the first round, that was about 2% click-through rate all. And now this new campaign's at 5%. So putting that link on the ad seems so far to have significantly improved the click-through rate. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about right now is like the Instagram Reels being so new, I think is contributing to the low cost per click, 9 cents that we're seeing. That's about as low as I've ever gotten it for myself. On like previously I'd run stuff on Instagram stories and I think the lowest it ever was like 8 cents. But if I run that today, it's more around like 14, 15, which I kind of think is attributed to just more traffic and more competition on Instagram stories ads. So it's interesting that going to Reels, the cost is down pretty low. it's just really interesting. And, we calculated these numbers right before we recorded, and we were both like, holy cow, 57 cents per follower. It's just like everything's cut in half, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, I think you're totally right. Like, there's definitely a saturation of especially artists doing stories on Instagram, or doing ads on Instagram stories with calls to action of swipe up and stuff like that. I see them all the time. So I do think you're right that this is kind of right now a little bit of blue ocean, not a whole lot of red in the water. And so we're definitely benefiting on that front. I mean, not just from the link clicks, certainly from the CPM perspective, which is really, really great. But the fact that the link clicks did carry through and that people were engaging in that way was pretty exciting for me. I was definitely stoked about that. One thing to note that I don't think we touched on heavily, but all of our targeting on these ads is targeted to just what we call green light countries. So we're not going after, what Tone Den or other advertising platforms might call like second and third tier countries. We're only going after primarily in this, actually, it's just what we call the big six English speaking countries. So the United States, Canada, the UK, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. So we're not getting, shady traffic in here either. This is all, primarily targeted to countries where, bot traffic can exist, but not in the volume that you would see it in if you were targeting, say, Brazil or India or something like that.
Yeah. And yeah, so what Jack's saying is these are real people. They're not, these results aren't a bunch of bots that we're saying, yeah, this crushed it. It's like, no, these are real people. And something to add on top of that is that, when I open my Instagram up and there's like, oh, you've got, 20 new followers, I've just been like clicking on their names and seeing their profiles, trying to just see like, oh, where are these people from? Are they real? And what's interesting is, one, without a doubt, like you can tell that these are real people, but two, it skews younger than Facebook does, which makes sense considering it's Instagram and it's Instagram Reels. But I've been seeing a lot of like 18 years to maybe 30, kind of that like end of high school, to the end of 30s, like college age kids following us, which has been really cool because that's kind of a target demographic, I think, a lot for indies that is sometimes hard to reach in an affordable way, especially, with certain different types of campaigns and stuff like that. We've all heard the stories of like, oh, it skews older or whatever. So that's kind of just interesting that I'm just thinking about that now, but it seems to pull in real people, which it does, but also that it's pulling in like a skewing young demographic, which is super interesting.
For sure. Yeah, that is really interesting. I'm curious to see how that'll play out. We'll have to keep doing, we'll have to do another primer on this, down the line, another episode, as we continue to do this sort of testing. Really, my hope with this episode was just to give you guys a little bit of a ground level report of some of the stuff that we're seeing and doing, so that you can then take these ideas and start to test them yourselves. None of this is proven strategy or anything like that. It's really just us being able to test with great creatives and, a little bit of ad spend, and testing this new placement in a really, really dedicated, granular sort of way, and pivot where we want to. And it's been a lot of fun. Just to give you like a quick rundown of some of the pros and cons that have kind of come to my mind since running this test, and some things to keep in mind if you decide to get into this. Is one thing that's really cool is if you use a single post ID when creating your ads, you can actually stack the social proof on that real ad. So your comments will stack up across, the different audiences that you run. Your reactions will stack up, which is pretty cool. You can kind of build up social proof that way. Certainly the super cheap CPMs are a big pro. Just being able to reach more people for less money. That's obviously a big kind of win here. A con related to that stacking social proof is right now you can't post your Reels ads to your profile after the fact. So you can't put them in the Reels section on Instagram right now. You also can't use existing Reels post as your ad. So you're not able to boost in the same way that you would, an organic post on Facebook or the Instagram newsfeed. That's definitely one con that came to my mind. Ed, you could probably touch on this one, but follower tracking is manual, which is definitely a con.
Yeah, it's a con, both for Spotify and for Instagram. There's no metric that's saying like, oh, here's what your cost per follower was, or here, inside Ads Manager. So,
or even how many followers you got. Yeah.
Right. So real quick, just to talk you through how to do it. I mean, it's not hard, but it is manual, and you do have to do it, every day or every 2 days at the latest. But within Instagram, the spreadsheet that I have set up, it's just like date, number of new followers, which if you go into your Instagram and you go to your main profile page and you click on the top right and you find insights, it'll show you how many followers you've added. So, you just put the ad spend down, and then you put the number of followers down, make a formula to calculate cost per follower there, and you'll be good. And same thing within Spotify for Artists. You do have to do it manually, and Spotify you have a little bit more leeway on because it saves all your historical data. Instagram, as far as I can tell, you've got a 5-day window, and it's delayed by a few days. So for today, for example, before this, we recorded this, it had not been, the Instagram numbers had not been updated, I think, for yesterday. So there's like a little bit of a lag. So, if you're organized and you have your little spreadsheet together, it's not too bad. Just put a reminder in your phone, but it's definitely a little bit of a nuisance where it's like, it would be nice just to pull up Ads Manager and say, oh, here's what my cost per Instagram follower was. So that's
for sure.
That's definitely a little bit of a con.
Yeah. And I think just to add on to that, like, it's hard to have perfect attribution, right? Like, you don't know if those followers are really coming from the ads by themselves. So if you've got organic growth happening, it's hard to keep track of, or it's hard to really prove where things are happening. Now, if you had no growth on either of those platforms and you turn your ads on and all of a sudden your growth is ticking up, then you can make some educated guesses. But I think that's definitely like something to be aware of when doing this kind of testing, is like attributing where your growth is coming from isn't as perfect as other kinds of advertising, whether it's trying to get people on your email list or getting sales or something like that.
And I think one thing too there is like, just be honest with yourself when you're doing this, if you are manually tracking it, because I went back and I historically looked at, oh, here's how many followers we typically get on Instagram. And I've been tracking this stuff for the last year due to just like different tests I've been running. So I have that baseline. But if you're going to start this, like, let it go for a week and see how many followers you pick up daily, because the last thing you want to do is be spending money and lying to yourself saying like, oh, it's working, I'm getting followers, but if you're historically picking up 10 followers a day and now you're spending $10 and you're getting 11 followers per day, it's like, well, it's not actually working that well for you. So it's
that's such a good point.
It's like you got to be honest with what you're seeing, and you got to establish a baseline. So before you do this, you should wait a week and just go in every day, track it, and then you'll know, so you can actually calculate what's really working for you, because that's important. You want to just be spending money. But I think the interesting thing here, maybe to wrap up, and I know you have a couple more cons that you might want to touch on, but I think the interesting thing is like, what is this good for? What is this good for in terms of how do you use it to grow your ecosystem? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's kind of twofold. Like, I think for one, just like very much like top of funnel. I think it's great from that perspective for growing top of funnel awareness, especially on Instagram right now, because you see so much bleed over into followers and a lot of engagement. So you're building up listenership with people who are engaging with you on a platform. So if you have a desire to grow, if you know that your fans, the types of people that you want to be getting in front of, tend to hang out on Instagram, this could be a really solid way of testing. I want to get in front of more of these people. This is how I'm going to do it. That can be a really solid way of doing it. If you're looking to run ads to send people to Spotify and trying to do it in a very cost-effective manner, or as cost-effective as possible, this could also be a strategy worth testing as well. I think those are kind of the two places where it primarily fits into your general ecosystem right now. Because right now you can't retarget Reels video views. So like select a Reels video and then retarget a certain amount of views. You can't do that yet, but I'm hoping that that's something that might come down the line.
That'd be sick.
Not that retargeting a 15-second Reel video view is all that crazy or all that engaged, but it would be really cool to have that feature. But that's my general thoughts right now. I mean, and those are kind of the main pros and cons that have been on my mind throughout this test. So I hope you guys dug this. It was a lot of fun to get into the weeds a little bit and start to do some testing. We're definitely going to be doing some more.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited for this new campaign to run for another week. We said it's only been going for 3 days, but I'm sure we'll keep running this, for weeks and weeks and testing and seeing what we can make better and check back in with you guys. But it's definitely very exciting and honestly working better than I thought it was going to work. So that's why you got to test stuff. So it's pretty cool. Yeah,
definitely pleasantly surprised. I hope you guys dug this. I hope that you take some of these ideas and maybe start, putting a little test budget aside, even if you spend like $15-20 just to give it a shot. Yeah. There's definitely some things in here. Hit us up if you do and let us know the results that you see. Definitely curious to hear more use cases. But until next time, we'll catch you guys soon. Go get it with some IG Reels. Put some content on TikTok, and I hope to see you guys growing. Peace out, Indies.
See you guys.
Can y'all really feel us? East Coast, feel us, West Coast.